Hello, today I will be doing my equity focused data review project. I will be doing this on my phone because I'm not sure how to record and share my screen, so this is what we're gonna do and it's gonna be okay. By Cristina Castañeda. Okay, so this is my equity data review project and I will be focusing on my practicum school, which is Como Park Elementary School. It's located in St. Paul and it is part of the St. Paul district. So we are under that district, yeah. So we have around 327 students. So it's a pretty small school, I would say. There's at least 5 languages represented, and that I know of. We have Somali, Hmong, Karen, Spanish, as like the main languages. But there's many more that are represented that I'm not aware of. Yes, and we also are a pre-K to 5th grade school, and technically there's also an early childhood center. It's just not in this building, but it is part of Como School, and there's also an online school with Como Elementary. So that is our school right here, and I'll go a little bit into the demographics of this school. It's the major population according to race and ethnicity is Asian, with 47% of Asian students. Then our next most represented is African American, around 20%. Hispanic is around 12%, and then white 12%, multiracial 8%, and Native American 1.5%. And one thing about our school is that it is very much dominated by multilingual learners, and we have a high percentage of those. So which is why I thought it was really helpful to, do this equity audit and just see how it functions for focusing on multilingual students. I guess I wouldn't say dominated, but there is a high number of multilingual students. So I wanted to focus on the social emotional aspect of MTSS and how MTSS is used to address social emotional behavioral things that come up. And I will be doing this with the SABRS data that we have collected, because this is a pretty major role in how we use MTSS in school. And this is also really important because this is the first year of Como Elementary doing MTSS. Doing the SABRS in their school. So this is the very first year it happened, and I think there's a lot to learn from it. So we just rolled out the MySabres, which is only the teacher rating. And MySabres is available only to the 5th grade students, and not a lot of them did do it in the MySabres. So we have mostly teacher data. And so for context, SABRE tests on 3 domains: academic, social, and emotional. And it shows like academic in the teacher's view, they're asking to gauge their interest, readiness, performance. And then the social, arguing, cooperation, and emotional, what are they presenting in class, sadness, anxious, and things like this. So this is with the language that they're giving as the teachers for them to rate their students with. So overall, this is the data that we had. We have 263 students in the low risk category, which is around 78% of the student population. Then we also have 52 students that are in the some risk area, which is around 15%, and then the rest are high risk, and that's 22 students. And something that's important to note in this data is that a lot of the students in the high risk category already have been identified in the SAT meetings or have an IEP. So these are students that have been captured with the way that they refer SCB referrals, which makes sense, right? Because a lot of the students, this is teacher reported, and I guess I didn't explain that. That the students who go into are identified as having social emotional developmental areas of growth have been referred by teachers. So that's the current referral process that they have, and now they're just rolling out with SABRS. So, which I had a slide about it, so I could have just waited. So The first step that we have in Como is the student referral, and this has happened through teacher referrals. There's a Google form that each of the teacher is able to fill out if they're noticing a student who is having any issues in their class. And of course, it's mostly students with externalizing behaviors and what they perceive as misbehaviors or inappropriate behaviors. So the number one, there's rarely does the parent refer them, but it's mostly teacher referral where students are identified as needing more support in this area. If they're not getting the if tier one social emotional is not enough for them. Then after the student referral, they talk about it in a team, and then they see if a small group would be beneficial. And there's usually a friendship group, usually in lunch, or it can be in the morning where they are going with the interventionist and playing a game with a group of students that's working on a skill, or a friendship group that's formed in lunch and they can sit together and talk with the teacher. And if after that the student is being monitored, they collect data on the number of ODRs and the times that any behavioral support is called into the classroom. And the SABRS data is now additionally a piece of data that is being used to monitor the students. And they can compare it with the fall and the winter and spring. Then after that, they discuss the student again in the meeting if the supports are not showing that the student has been improving in this area. So there's teacher and family opinion where we're all kind of trying to problem solve. And then they decide if they should either move to the next level, like a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, or if they should stay at that one, or if necessary to discontinue that if they're forming positive friendships. Yes, there are also options that if they're not working with the friendship group, they could go have like a hallway pass and just take a break with the behavioral support person and just take a break outside of the classroom if that's needed. So here's the ideal functioning. Currently, I want to explain what is currently being implemented and how MTSS2 could be implemented in this area. So in tier 1, I have to sneeze. It's gone. And I don't know how to edit this. So I'm just going to have to know that I was going to sneeze and I didn't. So in the tier 1 support in our MTSS current model, all of the students are receiving zones as their curriculum. And so they talk about zone, and a lot of students are very familiar with the zone's curriculum and know the language with it. And another tier 1 effort that is made is there is a buddy room system. So that means that out of all the first grade classrooms, let's say, and there's 4 of them, teacher A partners with teacher B, and if a student is not behaving in their classroom, they can send them to teacher A can send a student to the teacher B classroom, and there's a regulation station that they go to. So that's what the buddy room is. If they're needing a break from the space that they're currently in, they can go to the other class. The teacher will send them to the other class to take a break if they need that. There's also an emotional regulation station in each classroom, so a student can utilize that whenever they identify that they need that. And that kind of goes into our tier 2 support. If the regulation station or this buddy room system is not meeting the students' needs, then usually the process is that they would call the behavioral support staff member. This makes for a very reactive process, so there's just more attention put into the student, but more adults are involved. But that is our tier 2 support, is that the behavioral support person is called into the classroom. And it's also part of the process that when the behavioral support staff comes in or takes a student out, an ODR is reported for that. So that's how they get data with that too, to see how many times a student has been needing support with the ODRs. In the tier 3, then goes into the referral process, and they're seeing what supports outside of the classroom can be given, like friendship groups, and there's yes, so they go into the referral process, and either they go from the tier 2 support to the tier 3 and seeing if they are needing even more supports from that. So yeah, and the tier 3 process could also be like if a student is exhibiting that they are really anxious during music time or during math time. They have created like hallway passes, like I was saying before, where the student can go out, and that could be more individualized. And right now, the language that's used for SABRES that identify students is very broad and maybe subjective, because there's terms of descriptions that is being used like respectful for social or academically engaged, and how can they measure that, right? Being very broad in how they define the term respectful and engaging, and the ways that they describe that. And the Google form that's sent out, that's just for the teachers. Again, it's only putting in the teacher perspective. So there's not a lot of space for student voice. So now I would go into what the MTSS ideal functioning would look like. So in tier 1, I would substitute zones curriculum to second step. I researched this for another class, and I just saw that this could be implemented because it is offered in more than one language. It's fully translated in English and in Spanish. With that, I will say that it is only just translated. It's not culturally adapted to the Spanish-speaking population or any population, but it is available. So I would say that that's a better step than zones that is only available in English. And the second step curriculum also identifies that there's a need for more languages in teacher-parent communication. So there are letters that are sent home that are available in 10 languages. So I think to move towards MTSS2, I would go towards the second step curriculum because they can have the L1 and the L2 instruction if they're a Spanish speaker, of course. For tier 2, I would have options for regulation, leadership in the teaching process. So it would be a little bit more proactive, where the teachers can engage with the students and learn a little bit more about what would help them individually in their classroom as they get to know. And of course, this is a lot of work for a teacher, but I would want to offer at least my help as a school psychologist to look into the families represented in the classrooms and how are they differing across settings. And that kind of goes into tier 3, where they're able to have a little bit more individualized and culturally acceptable practices of regulation that may not be thought of within the staff already. And for specifically the SABRES, I would want to have definitions and examples of the language that's used within SABRES. So making a definition for terms such as respectful or engaged or appropriate, right? All of these things where I would want to put examples and specifically what that looks like for each cultural group that's represented. What does that look like for students that are from a Spanish-speaking household, or more specifically Mexican, Somalian, and because these could look very different in every cultural group. And I think that MTSS2 kind of touches on that. And another aspect of MTSS2, that before they get referred, the observations would be across settings, and one is required to be in a setting where their native language is used. And I think that this is really important because I wanted to kind of go into what this case study looks like. This is something that I observed in my school. And I'm going to say that the student's name is Bob, just because I think I like saying the name Bob. But Bob is a 5th grade student, and he is a newcomer refugee. And here is his scores, right? So he totaled a score of 31, which puts him in the some risk area, and out of a total score of 57. And in the social aspect, he got a 13 instead of an 18. Academic, he got 6 instead of 18. And in emotional, he got a 12. That's not a 21. So this is just something really important that I would like to point out, because the student was only observed in settings where English was the dominant language. and this student did not know much English coming into the school, and he is still learning. And when we had a meeting, a referral meeting, because the teacher was referring the student because of the some risk area, the teacher identified the student as someone who is defiant, and he described him as someone who just doesn't want to do the work. And I think that's something that's really problematic, because we don't have an opportunity to see him communicate with people in his native language. We don't have a cultural community where he is the majority and not the minority in his classroom. So this is something that where I believe MTSS2 could have prevented, where that observation is required in a different setting or in a community setting, and where there's language that's a little bit more defined. So some limitations because of the functioning that we have currently. A lot of teacher bias is being tied into these referrals. The self-reporting is limited because the student also doesn't have access to SABRES in their home language. And I think it would have been helpful to get their insight. And it kind of would bring more fidelity to our SAB process, because we're able to identify students in a little bit more holistic way. Some strengths and resources that we have right now in our school is, it is our first year with MySabres, so I feel like there is a lot of room for improvement and feedback, and I feel like it will be more well received because it is our first year and there's always improvements to be made. I think it would have been more difficult if this is something that they've been doing for a long time. It can be more rigid. But I feel like because it's our first time doing it, there's a lot of room for improvement and a lot of ways that teachers can buy in and students can be more, and families can be more open to doing this and collaborating with them. So I do say that we can improve. There's always room for improvement. And we do have a really diverse staff. We have a lot of EAs and we have most of the student population, racial and ethnic groups represented in our EAs. So sometimes they can also be, there also have been translators, interpreters, or cultural brokers. Of course, I am not sure what their role looks like, but I would hope that they would get compensated for that, and that it's not expected of them just because they're there to represent the group. But I do think that we have a good start with culturally diverse staffing, where students can see the representation and look towards people that could understand them a little better in a way that things don't have to be said sometimes. And we do have a high percent of MLL learners, so the staff will be able to see that this is a need that we need because we have so many students that are MLL learners. So MTSS2 could be a real buy-in because they would want to support those students. So some steps to go towards MTSS2. I think some teacher training would be really helpful behind what it looks like to be teaching MLL learners in the beginning of the year. And I would also additionally add that in the middle of the year, it would be helpful too, because I think it was you, Kirsten, in class that said that in the middle of the career is when a school psychologist makes the most mistakes. And I think that's true in any career. In the middle of the school year, I would even say the teachers have a routine and things that are established and they know the students, but it can leave room for bias, and what they have learned in the past few months of the students could stick. But I think some training in the middle of the year could be beneficial as they now know the students that they're working with. I think our second step would be to define the terms in admin and school psychology and admin and the school psychologists can collaborate to take the load off teachers to just kind of go through the MySabres list and define what that means. And even maybe create a cheat sheet or like a list for reference in the future of more sample questions of what does it mean to be engaged, and how do you define that? How does a student define that? And making a cheat sheet for either each word or each cultural group and seeing how that could tie in with the referral process. I would say that it's important to have community input, maybe tie in the student's voice into it. Do they want the support, right? If they're identified as some risk or high risk, asking them to, is that something that they feel that they need, or not? Because they should be able to have the autonomy to reject something that they don't feel like actually fits their needs. And being able to have other trusted staff fill out the SABRES if possible. That could take a load off of teachers and also be more insightful if a EA or a trusted staff member has a good relationship with the students and knows them in a deeper level than a teacher would. I think that would be really helpful to do, and I think a suggestion that could be brought up to the team that would go into the MTSS too. Also, because the trusted staff member might be seeing them more often in settings that are with their native language, like in a pull-up group or something, in a context where their native language is being used. And I would say that the steps before referral, I would want to change too. I would, before they're brought up to the team, maybe getting in some family input and seeing if that's something that they're seeing at home. And just having some background information, especially if the student is a newcomer or new to the school in general. We don't know that student very well yet, so being able to know patterns and stuff like that from family or community members that are willing to share about that. Or even the student themselves, asking them if that's something normal for them. And for the MTSS2 referral, implementing all the things that MTSS2 is addressing. So the observation, L1 settings, being in cultural groups and in community settings. All of these things that make up a student that is outside of a school. And these are my references. Yay! Okay, thank you, Kirsten. See ya.